not recorded before she says something.
I had to like upgrade my account to be able to record, because I was like, I can't see the recording. Why can't I see the recording? And it's because I had a business starter plan and not like a basic business plan. So
Shame.
I know, like, so I know I have to give Google more money.
Well, you know what's happening. You know what's going to happen sooner or later. Got to give Google its money.
Right, along with everyone else. Like, I really want to get the new Perplexity, but like, I just can't swing another another subscription right now.
Yeah, it's a subscription, all right.
Same. It looks amazing, though. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm just gonna probably hang out for, I don't know. No, let's start. If they're late, they're late. They can catch up with the recording.
You sure you're gonna wait 2 more minutes, or you just going?
I don't know. I thought at least my co-host would be here, but maybe.
See, your co-host is not even here.
No.
Yeah, you are.
Where to go knocking on her door?
Well, you know the way to train people to be on time is to start on time.
Start on time. Yep, that's my whole thing at work. That is my ethos. Don't train people to be late. So we can start on time, and they can catch up with the recording if they miss anything.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right, so I wanted to introduce Tony Rhem, who is a good friend of mine. We've been working together for a while. Tony's the principal of AJ Rhem and Associates, and he's been, I want to say doing AI, which sounds really awful, but Tony's been in AI for a long time. He is, in fact, a chief fractional
Yep,
chief
fractional chief AI officer for a few companies. And what that means is I'm not a full-time chief AI officer. They need a chief AI officer for a portion of the time to do AI strategy, help understand how to approach certain AI applications, AI needs within the organization, training the executives on AI use, AI ethics, things like that. So until the company matures and they need a full-time chief AI officer, then I can help them either, present myself for that position or help them identify a chief AI officer to come in and do the role full-time.
I love
Are we recording?
We are recording. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, I love that we can work like that now. I think that's awesome. It's like being an agency of one. It's like similar to what Kelly does, right? And also a LinkedIn voice for AI, correct? Is that what?
Yeah, top LinkedIn voice for AI and knowledge management. So,
yeah,
been working in AI. I started in around 89, 90, working in AI. Developing expert systems, neural network technology, neural nets for organizations from telecommunications, logistics. That's after I received my master's in AI from DePaul University in Chicago, and started my consulting company. And out the gate in the 90s, I was working in the AI field. And around 99, I got introduced to knowledge management and pivot into knowledge management, because both of them, to me, was synergistic as far as the outcomes, right? AI was all about capturing and codifying knowledge and making it available and enabling a machine to be able to think. And knowledge management is about capturing and managing that knowledge. So it's like two sides of the same coin for me. And then I got back into AI more around 2015 with the advent of the big data explosion. And with that, getting more into the machine learning piece of AI, because AI really is a multidisciplinary science. You have the machine learning, robotics, natural language processing, vision, neural nets. And it's a lot of derivatives of machine learning. So AI is a massive field, and it's not just generative AI, which is a new entry into the AI spectrum, but it's all those other pieces too. So it's a lot to think about, because a lot of times we just blankly say AI and not know what area of AI we're really focusing on. So
Right.
that is me. Oh, I've been able to write a few books and oh man, tons of articles, peer review articles around AI and knowledge management. And so doing a lot of research in there. So I like to call myself a scholar practitioner. So not only do I write, present, research, but I also help organizations implement this science. So it's not just telling you what to do, I'm also helping you do it.
And I get to write about Tony writing the books.
There you go. Exactly.
Something like that. All right. Do you want to go ahead with your presentation and then people can
Yes.
jump in if questions?
Yes, ma'am. Hold, let me start from the beginning. That'll be good.
Can I ask a quick question here? How do you make the presentation the full screen and remove our little boxes? Is there a way to do that?
See, I'm seeing the presentation as most of the screen, and then the boxes on the other, like the people on the side.
I am seeing the side, but my screen's like split 50-50.
Yeah, if you click on the three dots next to the hang up button and go to change layout.
All right, I'll find it. Thanks. That's what I think. All right, I got it. All right, got it.
Okay. Are we all seeing the first slide?
Yep.
Okay. So this is what we're going to discuss today. Basically, the foundational principles of ethical AI development. And I'm going to go through the principles and some of the other aspects of ethical AI, and we'll get into more conversation. We already talked about me. Been in the AI, KM, IT field for over 30 years. A lot of it in the AI and KM space where my focus is, and all the associated type of technology like data and information architecture. Done some things in the IoT space and blockchain. And been able to, one of the things I really enjoy doing is speaking at different conferences and different corporate events. I've been a keynote speaker at several conferences around the world and enjoy doing that as well. So besides the writing of the books and things of that nature. So at the end of the day, why are we here? I mean, a lot of folks have now got into artificial intelligence. Now we have the AI Salon. We have all these other organizations and these communities around AI. So we clearly know that the AI revolution is upon us. We all agree that it's here. Whether we are embracing it or running away from it, we know it's here. So also we also know that 2023 was the breakout year, right? The breakthrough on AI. So we had models that near human performance, right? With this chat GPT stuff and Bard, and you summarize and writing and things like that, that just made everybody take notice. Our large language models became this is the fastest adopted technology in human history. I mean, this is, once that exploded into the public grabbed hold of it and just started using it. We've talked many times, Vicky and I, about the chat GPT, building your own GPT and just playing with this technology and seeing how it works and see how we can benefit from it. So the other thing was this cross cost threshold for affordability. Now you pay a $20 fee, monthly fee. Some of it's free, right? You have the free version of a lot of the software, and you have a small monthly fee. But so that makes the affordability. It creates a lot of affordability. That affordability creates adoption, and so that's why a lot of people have jumped on that generative AI bandwagon, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard, Midjourney, or whatever. We jumped on it because of the low cost, the affordability of it. So at the end of the day, all forecasts on AI's impact has radically changed. Where we thought before it's going to take a while, years for AI to catch on, now we see AI is like, oh my God, this is going like wildfire. So how will organizations approach AI? All this people jumping into AI, AI is more in our face, more accessible, more affordable. How are organizations approaching AI? Now, this is a lot for us to kind of think about that background. How is your organization approaching AI? So according to McKinsey, our friends at McKinsey, in the next 12 months, 80% of Fortune 1000 companies are going to integrate AI into their products and services.
Yeah.
80%. Some kind of AI, whether it's low-hanging fruit for customer service, self-help off your corporate customer-facing website, or whether it's predictive analytics within your products and services that you use now, or some generative AI capability. Companies are going to be using AI in a lot of their products and services. Because of this, Gartner, it's not hard to imagine this, that AI spend will triple this year. Triple. So this is fueling, and you guys are probably, you all are more than anyone else are aware of the AI arms race, right? Everybody, all these companies pushing AI, getting AI things, products and services to market, looking for AI talent. I mean, it's just going crazy. So they are spending, and not just for the software side, on the semiconductors, the chip side, the GPU chips and so on, right? So you got companies like NVIDIA and their competition really pushing the chip market as well in order for AI to become more powerful, which creates a lot of environmental issues, which that'd be something we can touch on in another conversation. But with all this going on, where do we start? Where do we start to deal with this, and what really makes sense, and how we deal with it? I personally think, and I think this is a lot of conversation from the folks I deal with on different boards of companies and senior leaders, is how do we get our arms around this? I mean, now that the toothpaste is out of the tube, we can't jam it back in. How do we deal with this? So the first thing that I recommend is to put some guardrails around what you're doing. Incorporate from a foundational perspective, a sound AI ethics and governance framework. That is super important to do. And now more than ever is a good time to start, right? So how do we do this? What is really AI ethics and governance? That's it. You can span the landscape of different companies and organizations that's putting out AI governance standards, AI frameworks, ethical frameworks. It's a plethora of that's already out there. In this country, we know that the White House with this AI Bill of Rights some time ago, now this executive order for AI governance has been established. They're moving forward on trying to incorporate some laws, some legislation around AI. The EU AI Act, which is the world's first legislation around AI, has been passed. You got the NIST framework, you got the OECD framework, you have IEEE framework. There's so many different frameworks for AI governance and ethics that it's you really don't have to, because of that, you really don't have to start from scratch. If a company wants to get into AI ethics and governance, grab one of those standards. I recommend in this country the NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, their framework, or the IEEE, but NIST is one that's commonly used because NIST also has a risk framework that a lot of companies have adopted. So if you already have that in your organization, in your risk assessment area, add on the NIST AI assessment and risk analysis area too, to then incorporate your own company's policies around AI and AI ethics and governance. So that helps establishes that. So a company's not really starting from scratch. So if you look at AI ethics, to me, what I've been focusing on for the last several years is establishing these pillars of ethical AI, ethical artificial intelligence, right? So you have to have trustworthy systems, which quite frankly, we want to be able to trust the outcomes. We know that something called, which I hate this word, hallucinations from the generative AI perspective, that when that happens, you can't really trust the outcomes. You have to really understand prompt engineering. You have to really understand how the domain in which you're querying with the the actions that you're putting in these prompts. So you have to have some kind of background in those areas to really trust what the software is delivering. So that trustworthiness is something that we have to work on as we before we release an AI application. The other piece is explainability, being able to explain the answers. So if you get the results from a particular application, you want to be able to, the application should give you the capability to explain the result. How did we get to this result? And to be able to say and identify the steps that were taken. Back in the day when I was developing expert systems, we had a piece in there how to explain our answers by traversing the expert system tree of where the data came in, what decisions were made, what rule was fired, why that rule was fired, why that rule was fired, what other rules were fired because of that. It was easy to produce a graphic that explained where the answer came from. And back then, we used confidence factors within the rules as well to have some kind of confidence factor of, oh, we are 95% sure that this is the correct answer. And so the person working with that expert system had an understanding of the capabilities. And this was back in the 90s. Now, it's become a whole lot more sophisticated now. And too many black box systems have been developed where it's hard to have a system be explainable. And the explainability also triggers that being able to be transparent as well. Explainability really promotes transparency in the systems. So that's the other thing to really look out for. The next pillar is being unbiased, right? Really limiting as much as we can the bias from these applications. And that starts, for me, it starts from the data. Understanding what data makes sense for the algorithms that you have selected for your application, and make sure you remove as much bias from the data as you possibly can. Because the AI algorithm would do nothing more than accelerate that bias, right? Because it just takes it and runs with it. It doesn't have any filters. You gave me this data. That's the data I use. I'm going to crunch it. I'm going to leverage it. I'm going to do whatever I need to do with it. But my algorithm says, and I'm going to spit out an answer that I think from what the data is telling me. At the end of the day, even if we do all these things, we have trustworthy, explainable, it's unbiased. We want to make sure it's used responsibly and it's designed responsibly. So I know some organizations have on their websites that they will not sell their AI products to companies that they believe will not use their products in a responsible way. So that's, when I saw that a couple of years ago on the site from an organization, I said, wow, they were really forward looking in what they wanted to do. So you have to have guardrails and policies in place for responsible use and design. So what are some of the ethical issues and challenges that we have? And I mean, you guys probably know a lot of these already, but from those pillars of ethical AI, we take a little deeper dive into the next layer, and we uncover some of the ethical issues and challenges. Right? We got bias and fairness, what we just talked about. Machine learning models inadvertently learn and perpetuate bias presenting in the training data. So that's the first piece. The next is transparency, which I just mentioned. Many algorithms, particularly deep learning algorithms now, that when we talk about machine learning, there are several types of algorithms, and you have deep learning is one of them. and we can have a conversation at another point about the different types of algorithms and how they being used, where they're used, and what makes sense, and what algorithm to use for what use case. So deep learning models, a lot of times it's viewed as a black box because the layers run so deep within the algorithm, it is difficult to explain the results from it. It's so difficult that there are AI applications that are used to analyze other AI applications. So just think about that. Depends on the intricacies of that algorithm. That's meaning that decision-making process can be difficult to interpret without transparency. It's a challenge to understand, trust, and even challenge the AI decisions. So you gotta nail this transparency and explainability piece down. Of course, what did we just find out in the news recently about Johansson, yeah, Black Widow, and about how OpenAI just cloned her voice without her permission. That's privacy concerns. So AI models, especially in knowledge delivery, often require vast amounts of data to train. And so what did the writers' strike really, one of the pillars of that writers' strike was about their rights as far as their own property that they have developed. Also, then when people have their information out in the internet, and we have these tools that are going across the internet to be trained, and it's privacy data there that needs to be accounted for. So there's HIPAA, there's the the GDPR. There's a lot of different privacy areas that we have to be concerned with AI. And so these more sophisticated models can inherently inadvertently and with training data discover more privacy within the data that's processing. So that's privacy concerns are huge, and dependency and autonomy, over reliance. Okay, we're using ChatGPT now. We've got to make sure that it's producing the valid results. We don't want to become over reliant on our AI and over trusting it. We still have to make sure when we're using these ChatGPT, Bard, all these language models, we still got to make sure that the decisions and answers that it comes up with is correct, but we don't want to be over reliant on it and just let it go. Oh, this is what ChatGPT gave me. I know it's right, and just use it. And especially when it comes to writing peer review or research material, you run into plagiarism issues, and a lot of institutions are having policies around quoting and identifying information that's produced by AI. So that's huge as well. And of course, the other piece is quality and reliability. So if the training data is flawed, so back to the data, the training data is flawed, or the model has not been adequately validated. So it's a lot of what's happening in the AI, what I call the AI arms race, is that companies are releasing products and services and tools to the marketplace before they are adequately validated and trained. That is a huge concern. We are getting flawed technology out here that we're trusting to use. So it must be validated. So that these are the ethical issues and challenges that's facing AI. It's going to continue to face AI until we get some ethical boundaries around this software and anything that uses AI, to when it's released, we can have some kind of comfort knowing that it's more or less doing what it's supposed to do in an ethical manner. Earlier, I was just discussing with Vicky that the IEEE, and I think a couple of other organizations have training that around uncovering and understanding algorithmic bias. And so with that training, you can assess if an AI application is biased or ethical or not. And from the IEEE, if you bring them in to assess your product from an AI perspective, if it passes, they can validate that and present your organization with a certificate of certification for your AI applications to certify that they are ethical and unbiased. And so I think that is going to be more and more prevalent for applications when they hit the market now, and especially in Europe with the EU AI, having a certified body look at your application and certify it. I think it's going to be more and more. It's going to be more and more of a requirement. So let's look at the 8 principles, or what I call them the 8 principles of ethical AI development. One, and this is going to be a recurring theme here. One, define ethical guidelines and principles. Well, I told you earlier that you don't need to go and define them from scratch. You can go to one of the several AI ethical governance standards and adopt that framework, modify that framework, and align it with your organization. And so that will help your organization define your ethical guidelines and principles when it comes to AI. It's important to have a clear ethical framework, and I can't stress this enough, and have the right stakeholders involved, stakeholder engagement from your DE&I area. This is where I believe the diversity, equity, inclusion, or whatever the organization is calling it, is a critical voice stakeholder in AI applications to help mitigate bias in these applications. So stakeholders, identify your stakeholders, and some of them are included here. You may have an ethicist, definitely your legal experts, because if your AI systems are biased in the hiring process, if there's some AI there, or bias in other places that really are critical to your users and your customers, your company will face legal action. And so you have to include your legal area to ensure that, hey, this is not going to cause any legal issues for us. So that's one thing. Number one, define ethical guidelines and principles. Number two, data. We keep talking about data, and data is super important, right? Because that's the lifeblood of any algorithm that you use. So the bias mitigation, you got to understand what data to use. Ensure the data that use the trained AI models represents the population it will serve. Don't include data that's outside of what you need to use the data for. Understand your use case. Understand your purpose. Line the data that you need for that. And then also understand any potential bias within that data and your algorithm use of that. If you could, may have to remove age or race or any specific group identification that may harm that group with that algorithm, or tweak the algorithm to have those other aspects be a less of a determining factor in the decision. So there's a lot of other things you can do from the data and algorithmic perspective. Privacy and consent. Collect data with the informed consent of individuals. Right? Make sure, we are experiencing when you go to the airport, and sometimes before you board a plane, they will do a facial scan. And so you should be able to opt out of that facial scan because you don't know what they're going to do with your data, or you ask them, what are you going to do with my data you're collecting? Some of them will say that we destroy the data after, your scan. You said, well, where's that policy? Where's that policy located that details that? Is it on your website? See, and we don't even know that until you get to the airport. So, watch out for that too. And so this, we talk about the GDPR and so on, privacy and consent, and data security. We've been hit by so many data breaches from companies. I've gotten letters saying, "Oh, your data could have been in this breach of several million customers." I'm like, secure your data. Companies need to do, because AI is allowing the hackers and the bad actors to get in and get your data. And so cybersecurity is a huge area that's become even more prevalent in this space, and they're looking for those types of people that can help in the data security area.
Hey, Tony.
Number 3, yes.
I was just going to say, when you're talking about the first point that you had there, I have notes somewhere and I need to find them. We were talking from an insurance perspective about how it's a proven fact that smokers have a shorter lifespan, but you can't put that in your insurance policy or like in the insurance data because it's biased against smokers.
Wow. Yeah.
Some act that was passed in Colorado before this last recent act. I'll see if I can find the information on it.
That's a great point, because if you're not aware of those laws, that can come back and bite you. And that's why it's so important to get your legal people involved. And they need to have that breadth and depth of knowledge from the legal landscape of all the areas which your company operates in. That's man, I didn't know that. That's
I wouldn't want to be a lawyer right now. Rick has his hands raised. Man,
because the laws have not even caught up with the technology. So it's ever expanding landscape of opportunity to get a hold of, get this under control.
Go ahead hang on, Rick, because Tony can't see the comments or the hands.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Tony, I'm Rick McCauley. I've been leading professors at Broward College about creating the policy for Broward College today. And one of the things I was amazed by is AI can be used on any laptop and email conversation that you've had. And at a speed, it can identify if you've been on LinkedIn looking for a job. It then can put you aside into a group. It's complete and absolute control of your identity. Even if you're going through and selecting candidates for a job, you can add bias in between the front end coming in the door and deciding what the filtering system is. So there's all kinds of philosophies about HR that are just out of control at this point.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard to. So you bring up a great point about understanding the process, and where in the process are we including AI, and where is that human in that loop or in that process that's going to help monitor and manage that? Because what you're pointing out is a monitoring and management issue, and it's in all these different aspects and points within the process. It's hard to get a hold of it when this thing is being rapidly done.
Yeah,
this is not done one day and the next day. No, this is within seconds. This is done, and so it's become more and more difficult for it.
We're flying an airplane with no walls on it right now, at about 10,000 feet. We better put something up fast.
Very fast, exactly. It's definitely flying an airplane in the sky. That's definitely right. So so for design and development, fairness and inclusivity, transparency, and an interdisciplinary approach, the different experts, right? And so that's and for me, I put that as a diverse team. Have a diverse team. And I call it diversity of thought, that interdisciplinary approach. And it covers cultural background. It covers your expertise. All of these pieces are important. On the side note, I talked to an organization that have cognitive psychologists on their team. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that is such a advantage for them, because from a cognitive psychology perspective, they could take another lens within the data and scrub it from that perspective, and because they look at it differently. That's what the ethics and sociology and but it's hard to cover every single person and every single part of this. But they identified that need, and they brought in cognitive psychologists, and I'm thinking, wow, if you had somebody like that working with you to identify the types of people you need, and to be able to get those people and understand where and how they need to work within this process, I think is huge. It's a huge advantage. The next thing, number 4, is algorithmic training. One thing we kind of forget, and then we've been talking about today, though, the data is, and that's key, and then training the algorithm with this data. So training on a diverse set of data with big data, part of the big data spectrum is having diverse data sets, having variety of and the amount of data. And so that helps prevent some of the biases, but it has to be the right data. It has to be scrubbed. It has to be with the right labels and things like that, especially if you're doing supervised learning, which need labels for the data. So it's a lot of that cleansing and curating of data that you need to happen for your algorithms. Then we talk about the transparency and explainability, make sure you have that available. We talk about here proper documentation. Documentation is key. Right? If you have proper documentation, you can go back and say, hey, this is how the algorithm should be performing. This is how it should be behaving. And you have constant monitoring involved to do that. You can then explain how the algorithm came up with the different answers. And the other piece here is accountability. Now, in the IEEE AI assessment, they have an area of accountability. Who do you go to when this algorithm or AI product or service, whatever it is, goes awry? Who is accountable for this? And you'd be surprised, people keep looking at pointing the other direction. It's not me. I'm not accountable for this, but organizations have to define that accountability. So that's going to really make people think, right? Because some companies, you guys may have hear about this AI washing, right? When a company says they're using AI, but really not. So it's pumping out, oh, we use AI, we use AI for this, we use AI for that. But if you really have governance and laws around AI, then they have to show where they're using that. That's going to eliminate a lot of companies from trying to, be a facade of they using AI, but really not, especially when it comes to having accountability for the actions of the AI. And then, of course, you have the privacy, data and privacy protection. The other piece is this is essential when the cybersecurity piece is robustness and safety, adversarial training and stress testing. Now, we don't know how much testing a lot of these systems have before they're released, but if you do conduct adversarial training and stress testing, that will ensure the algorithm will perform as expected and help you uncover any bias and answers that deviate from the intent before you release it. So, algorithm training, number 4 on this list. Now we have testing, and that leads into testing and validation. Training, and then you go to a set of training, then another layer of testing and validation. I mean, at the end of the day, you're also going to do continuous monitoring. So you never stop testing this thing, because once AI has been released, you may incorporate or encounter new data that you didn't have during the training and you didn't have during the testing. And so that's why you're monitoring monitoring the results of the algorithm, the performance, to make sure that it's still behaving as intended. So got to have the robust testing, impact assessment, and continuous monitoring. Back to accountability and governance, not only when we look at from the model perspective, but if you just dive into the accountability aspect of this, you have to have clear processes of who is accountable for what. And one, like I said, the IEEE looks at an individual. Now, I'm not too sure on if companies really are going to tag a individual as accountable for the AI performance, and when lawsuits happen, that person is named in a lawsuit. That, that's going to be a little dicey when you trying to bring somebody in for that position and say, well, you're going to be the person responsible. You got to pay me a whole lot of money and make sure I have a whole team of lawyers representing me if something happens, because this clear accountability structure is important, but you got to make sure that you're not, in my own opinion, just have one person. Then you have regulatory compliance and ethical audits like the IEEE I've mentioned earlier. So number 7 of 8, user feedback. We want to educate our users, and this is something really we should do at the beginning. Educate our users of this is what our company is doing, using AI for. This is the outcomes we're looking for. Provide clear information on how and why certain data is used and AI is used, and have an opportunity for your staff to give feedback on your AI, and that helps. At the end of the day, with any system, it helps with the improvement over time. And at the end of the day, number 8, promote ethical culture. Use that training awareness to help promote that ethical culture. And it's an ongoing thing, right? Because AI is going to evolve. It's not going to stay stagnant. You have to have that ethical leadership. That goes back, but some companies are even looking at now, not only chief AI officers that take on that ethical piece, but in some larger organizations, a chief AI ethics officer. That's the whole existence is understanding the company's implementations and use of AI, and understanding the vulnerabilities and ethical challenges of that AI. So when we talked about how the AI in the future of work, and AI is going to create new jobs and it's going to eliminate some jobs, create new jobs, then we're talking about some of the new jobs now. Chief AI officer, chief AI ethics officer. You got cognitive psychologists coming into play. You have DE&I roles evolving. You have knowledge management roles evolving into understanding more AI and how that's producing decisions. It's an ever evolving landscape when it comes to new positions. So taking those principles, we kind of discussed a little bit of this as we went through the principles, right? The 8 principles of ethical AI development is we implement these principles. Start with a sound business case for AI development. My thing is, this is with any software, any new product, any like the metaverse, right? Anything that you're gonna use, have a reason for it. Don't just say, "Oh, it's a new shiny toy. I want to bring it in. I want to use it," and have no clue on what it does, right? Start with a sound business case and understand that for your AI development. Adopt a standard. Have a diverse AI development team. All the things we talked about. Adopt, and this is very important, and something that Vicky talks about as well, that human in the loop, that a human-centered AI approach. So you want to make sure that you have folks monitoring your AI, and making sure you have policies in place to identify if something goes wrong, a mitigation strategy. Having that human in the loop is super important. Follow the principles of ethical AI development, those 8 principles. Use a variety and volume of curated, unbiased data. That's that big data piece, right? The volume and variety, make sure you curate it correctly, there are tools out here to help you do that. I know the IBM Watson X. I'm not not much for pushing certain products, but I know the IBM, because I'm familiar with that IBM Watson X environment, has part of its capabilities is to help you curate your data, and then just follow sound data ethics policies, which lead us into this last section on curated unbiased data. Since data is, to me, the lifeblood of AI algorithms, right? These are things that you just must have and must use. Clear need and user or public benefit for that data. Why are we using that? Why are we using the fact that this person is a smoker? And is that necessary? Does that really discriminate against all smokers? Does that really tell me I need to jack up their insurance rates by a factor of 10? I mean, why are we using this data? Be aware of relevant legislation, just like we talked about the other law. I had no clue of that. So be aware of relevant legislation and codes of practice. That's where your legal area comes in. Use data that's proportionate to the user need. Don't bring in data that's not needed or not useful. That's only going to skew what the algorithm decisions are made, right? Also, understand the limitations of the data. Sometimes you have gaps in the data. You need to get other data. So understand what your limitations are in the data that you have. And I'm pretty sure most companies, and especially most larger companies, have data standards. Make sure you leverage those data standards. Your data is your data, whatever it's used for. Especially with AI, have those data standards and policies and procedures in place, and make sure that they're being adhered to, and make sure they're up to date. That's important. That's not it. A lot of people have other companies have these data standards and policies, and they just quote unquote sit on the shelf or not being used. Make sure they're integrated into how you actually do the job. Make your work transparent and accountable as possible, and embed data use responsibly. I'm giving some prescriptive measures. I'm giving some way forward in a lot of these aspects of implementing implementing ethical AI in your AI development. So these are prescriptive measures. These are things I talk to companies about all the time. And these prescriptive measures. And now, how do you execute it? I even work with companies on how to execute and get these things in place and into your products. So it's prescriptive measures, but if you follow this and you practice it more and more, it becomes part of the requirements for your AI applications. It will benefit the company immensely. And so these are some of the key points that I just pulled out of the presentation. And I know Vicki is very good at doing this and pulling out key points. Some of hers may differ, but this is what I pulled out. The AI revolution in 2023 highlighted as a breakthrough year for AI models. Affordability and adoption. We all know AI has increased with significant economic impacts. AI's impact, right? An investment of over $3 trillion in AI is expected to contribute $16 trillion in global economy by 2030. Now, I have sources with this from this where this information has been gathered, but this is incredible. Just large language models alone have been identified as the fastest adopted technology ever, and not just large language models, period, because more companies are using the language models within their ecosystem, right? So it's not just the large language models, period, but that transformer architecture is the basis of these language models, and using that chat GPT type of functionality, but it can summarize and get more information out of your data. That's being more and more ways of doing that better are being developed. Organizational adoption of AI, 80% of Fortune 1000 companies will integrate products and services in the next 12 months. Follow the 8 principles of ethical AI development. I mean, that's the big brunt of this. If we follow those principles, we are definitely going in the right direction. And having sound data ethics principles that will, this is definitely going to help with, have unbiased data in our algorithms. And AI applications need to be explainable, trustworthy, ethically sound, and used responsibly.
Tony, we have a question. Oh, there's
Now,
the question.
now we have questions. Okay.
But-
Was there a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for doing this. This was so interesting and educational. And for somebody who's new, I guess, to AI, certainly from your perspective, I am. So can I ask you a few quickie, maybe definitional questions? I mean, I'll ask one and then we'll see what happens. When you say training data, I'm assuming it's a set of data information that's used to sort of like starter information into an AI system. That data then grows or learns and expands as time goes on. Is that what you mean by large language model? And how does that information learn, if you will?
Okay. So it's a couple.
All over the map.
It's a couple of points in your question.
All right.
One, training data. So you have a certain amount of data that you will use to actually train the algorithm. So the algorithm has to be fed data,
Okay,
to understand and get used to and gain knowledge from the type of data that you're feeding it, to make sure that you, as the AI algorithm developer, and understand that, okay, the algorithm is supposed to do X. I'm feeding it data. These are some of the outcomes I'm expecting from this algorithm based on the data I'm feeding it. And then you're looking at, is the algorithm performing as expected? So this is a subset of data that you use in the training. So then when you move to the next phase and you have a more integration of data that you're feeding it. Now you're feeding it a vast amount of data, not just a small amount of training data, just to get it to understand, get it to know what it's doing. But now you're feeding it more data, and now it's really cranking out, really getting the decisions, really understanding what is
now
what's going on.
When you say feeding more data, you're talking about it's a bigger data set that's coming in from other sources, things like that.
Yeah. So now from just training, it's like, look at it from a sports perspective. If you train, you get in shape, you're running, you're lifting weights, whatever, and you practicing, like it's basketball, you're practicing the plays, you're making sure you understand it, and then when the real game happens, your data is hitting you all the time. This guy is moving this way, and the play is supposed to go this way, but I know a deviation for the play is this based on where the player moved. Now I got new data. I'll react this way. So the algorithm is the same thing. At the beginning, you're just getting the algorithm in shape. You're training. You're giving it data, getting it in shape. Understand that what it's going to be expected to do. Then you get into a practice, and you get more and more data. So okay, I'm getting better at this. And then when it's live, it's fed all types of data. And then you really know how it's going to act. But see, with large language, another part of the question is large language models. Large language models are it's a couple of things. Large language models, now you can get a pre-trained model. A lot of the pre-trained models are trained on the data from the internet. Now that's a vast amount of data. So it's trained on that data. Now you then bring that pre-trained algorithm into your own environment, and you train it some more with your own specific data. Now, not only does it's pre-trained with internet or whatever data it's pre-trained with, now it's trained again with your own data for your organization. And then it's part of your testing. We talk about algorithm training, and we talk about testing. You feed it more data, then you release it. That's when you say, I'm comfortable that the algorithm is going to behave correctly. It behaved like it's supposed to in the training data. Now I've given more data in the testing. Still behaved great. Now I'm going to release it for lot in the wild, right? And just let it go. Let's do its thing. I'm going to monitor it. But then that's when the real data comes in. And so when the real data comes in, you already have an ideal or expectation of how the algorithm is going to react, what decisions this should render, and make sure that bias doesn't occur. So your question is great because it takes you through a journey of the development of the algorithm and where the data is being leveraged, right? So
Right.
I try to equate that to a sports analogy because hopefully that I didn't confuse.
Well, can I just ask one other that I'll get out of the way, which is about bias? You're sort of asking machines to do what humans can't do. I mean, that's the way I'm hearing what you're talking about.
No, you're absolutely right. So let's take a step back. So everyone has inherent bias.
Sure.
Okay. One of the ways to kind of because I never believe you can eliminate 100%. But one of the ways we help mitigate that bias is by having a diverse team that, from a cultural perspective and your background and this experience perspective. That's why we have, I told you about the psychologists, right? And sociologists, and all the other people on your team to help mitigate that bias and understand, where bias may be occurring. Because all of us have our own inherent bias. We may just totally just miss it, right? And that's why you continually monitor the algorithms as well, because like you said, we're asking something a machine to do what humans haven't been able to do. But at the end of the day, it's not going to do 100%. It's not, and believe it or not, some bias is needed based on the use case that you using the algorithm for. So that's all part of the risk profile, the bias profile, and things like that. So you hit a nerve when you say, well, how you can expect the machine to eliminate the bias when we as humans can? And the answer is we don't. We just wanted to mitigate as much as possible, and especially in areas where it's so prevalent, like in the HR hiring practices, for instance, or insurance, evaluations and things like that. So we can really get to that bias mitigation. And some of the things, it's so culturally embedded that only someone with some of that cultural background say, oh, this is biased to this particular group.
Yep.
We need to remove this type of data.
Right.
So that's part of the deal too.
Wow. Thank you, Tony. This was tremendous.
Oh, you're welcome. By the way, my latest book, Essential Topics in AI, touch on large language models, AI ethics and governance, AI in the future of work. So these are, as you can probably guess from the title, these are the real top topics at the point when I wrote this book late last year, when I finished it and it actually published early this year. Those were the prevalent topics, and diving into large language models. That's when I highlight the transformer architecture, and in the appendix I have some Python code as well that it's like stub code, but you can fill in the blanks if you're a Python programmer to actually build out a piece of this. So that's just additional information for everybody.
I was trying to interject, but I was on mute. Marsha has a question too. You can stop sharing if you like, so you can see the.
Am I still sharing?
Yep. There you go. Now you can see who has a question.
All right.
You're on mute, Marsha.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony, for your experience and expertise and sharing that with us tonight. I have a quick couple of questions. When we talk a little bit about explainability, from what I understand, the interpretability of these models is still an evolving concept, and how to interpret them. And what do you see about interpretability helping with explainability going forward, and maybe tying that into this certification process that you talked about at IEEE having? I'm wondering about the types of biases that they're tracking for, and also how do they account for changes? Like this can change overnight in a model. It could be fine one night, and the next day it'd be not working right. So, and then it comes in the whole MLOps thing and monitoring and all that. So I'm just there's a lot in there, but thoughts just in general there.
Yeah. It's a lot in there. That's what we have monitoring, because things change. And the assessment is IEEE assessment is for a point in time, and so your assessment usually is if you do it once, it has a particular schedule, like a yearly you would do. But yeah, those are some of the gaps. But for the IEEE assessor assessment, we look at the particular risk profile of the particular system, and we work with the company to help identify that risk profile. So we understand, and we look at the development of it, what went into the development, what went into the type of data, and we look at all those aspects, and then to understand how we focus our risk assessment, our assessment of the AI system, because we can't really go in a broad sense and say we're just going to assess it for bias. We're going to understand more about the system, more about the data, the intent, and the risk profile from that system. That way, you're focusing more in on it instead of broadly, but you're pointing out, you probably never get done. You got to really focus on that particular application and how that AI is being used, and that helps the assessors narrow it down.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You got great question. This group is too informed. Anybody else? Well, I definitely thank everybody for coming and inviting me. Vicky invited me, and you guys being here. Appreciate that. Oh, it's
yeah.
Raise hand. Yeah, raise hand.
I have one other question. This is Marcy again. You talk a little bit about bias and what companies can do. So what do you see within our organizations, or organizations that we're trying to start, or impacting our own organizations that we currently work for? How do we go about picking the people to help related to the bias, and who should be putting their hand up to do that, or who should be tapping on the shoulder, who know about the data and can help us with that aspect of getting started?
Well, you want to look at your data owners, data stewards, people who are really familiar with the data. You also want to make sure that stakeholders that are impacted by the application, or stakeholders that have a concern, or really a part of approving or assessing that particular application impact on the area, make sure that they have a voice. And so from those areas, you can kind of pick the people you need to be one on the team, and then in the extended stakeholders. So as part of the core team, if you look at, of course, besides the data scientist and then the AI developer and the data architect and things of that nature, you need the data steward, you need the SME in those areas that the system is being developed for. You need your legal department, as mentioned before. So there are some people that for sure you need And then there's some other people that, well, if it's be nice to have, if we had a cognitive psychologist, ooh, that would be great. And from there, but then also your stakeholders should have a representative that's involved. So it's start from there. I mean, and as an organization matures in their development of AI applications, then they would know who else to probably bring in, especially after they had a few deployments and been monitoring the applications for a while and seeing the results, and they can say, okay, how good are we at this, and what are the gaps as far as some of the expertise that we need to be involved, and kind of go from there.
Well, next we have
Yes,
Joy.
Rick.
Next on the list, Joy. Sorry, I'm going in order of who raised their hands. Joy is our co-host who had to.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for being late. I had some car trouble. Anthony, thank you so much. This is so interesting. I think my question to you would be, as far as for Vicki and I starting up this ethics group, what might help us get started? What should we focus on? We have questions from the AI Salon people, where can we direct them to get good answers that they can rely on? Things like that.
Wow. The one thing I think if you guys can direct people to the different AI governance standards, like the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, OECD, IEEE, they have resources and understanding ethics and ethical AI development frameworks for that. I will look at that. And look at there's quite a bit of training I think is being put out there now. LinkedIn, I know a couple of my colleagues on LinkedIn have training on AI ethics and things of that nature. Let me see. Dr. Horton has a class. And you can tap into me too, and I can send out some resources. But LinkedIn has these like our classes on responsible AI ethics and governance that can get people some other. Probably won't be more than what I just gave you, but it's another voice and way to focus on some of this more deeply. Babel, what's this? Oh, BABL. This is an organization I know. Folks there have a real concentration on ethical AI. You have the Stanford University has a human AI center. They really promote human in the loop, human-centered AI. So that's another resource.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of free training out here. So.
And Tony's a member of the AI Salon, so you can find him through chat as well.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It is. All right, Keith is.
So, I mean, those are some places to start, but.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Keith is
You're
up.
welcome.
Hi there. You can call me Dr. Keith. And first of all, enjoyed what you're talking
Dr.
about.
Keith, welcome. Sorry, Dr. Keith is.
No worries. Yeah.
I like your screen piece. What instruments do you play?
Saxophone and flute and clarinet and a few other things like that. All of them completely unethically. All of the worst possible scenarios that you can face.
Oh my gosh.
So, question for you in terms of you talk very much about all the things that companies are supposed to be able to do with ethical, responsible use of AI. It's all groovy. My question to you is, how do you start? How have you been starting the conversation, and what tactics have you been using when you reach a company who has not breached this area You reach a company who said, hey, we've been doing AI, we're doing great, all this stuff, but we haven't, done anything ethically, or this hasn't been a concern for us. This hasn't been a priority for us. We want to move in this way, either fast, or we're dealing with competition, or they have all the other things. What are the things that you say to them in order to start to get them on this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I've got that before. That's the tube is out of the toothpaste situation, where okay, we've got a system, it's been out there, we're finding that there's issues. The first thing we have to do is do an audit, do an assessment of the application, do an audit from the data that's being used to the algorithm that's being used, and look at the results. What have they documented? What have they captured? To understand, some of the gaps in the algorithm's decisions, right?
Sure.
And
Let me pause you there for a quick second, because I know that this is fantastic information that you have on that in the process. I should have been more clear. My question is, how have you been working with companies that have been resistant to?
Oh, resistant.
I'm sorry. That's probably a better way.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, they've called me, they contacted me. Oh, we got some issues. We want to bring you in. Okay. The resistance to that is because you see that more often. We're already ethical. We don't need anybody to come in and tell us. And so one, I only get that if I'm speaking at a conference or doing something like this, and so that's good and fine, but we don't really need this. And so I would approach it from a perspective of who are your clients, what type of feedback have you been getting from your clients as it pertains to your AI, and has that from a legal perspective, have you encountered any legal issues? I mean, things like that. If they think they're fine from that perspective, more power to them. And I would ask them, would you be open to an assessment to make sure that you say you're great, ethical, you're governing this thing correctly, you're monitoring the system, monitoring the system correctly. That's all great. And would you be opposed to having an assessment? I mean, that's what I would do. I mean, and if they just pretty much just say they check all the boxes from there, then I move on. I'm not going to try to beat a dead horse. But if they turn around and at some point want to talk to me about that and be open to it, then I'd be more than happy to start that conversation.
Groovy, thank you. I got to jump to another call, so I'm going to bounce, but I appreciate getting a chance to check this out. See you soon.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Dr.
See you
Keith.
next month. Okay, Rick is up next.
Oh, thanks so much. So my concern is I teach at college, and Microsoft is implementing their Copilot system.
Yes,
I mean, a product off the top. How do we adjust their ethical use of this? And we're doing a policy, of course, at every level, from the student syllabus on up to the policy for the college and how its use case is allowed to be used, especially when it's protecting private data about students and accessibility.
Right. I think in the Microsoft Copilot application itself, there are settings I think you can toggle off.
Right.
So I will look at that as part of executing my policy.
Right.
But I'm dealing with a municipality right now on the same subject, and we can write the policies, help them write the policies, and how to use it, when to use it, things of that nature. But Microsoft does a good job of working with the clients to help mitigate the unethical use of the Copilot product, and to make sure that it's used effectively. And that's why they have those settings within the Microsoft Copilot application. So you're on the right track.
Right. I've seen with the IT folks is that they can go in there and it's inside the tenant. So people that have connections, and so I have an ability to look at my students' information, private information, but I can't look at somebody else's. So they're having to individually set up a profile use case so I can't get to data I'm not supposed to access. And now that they have Copilot Studio, they're starting to connect databases together with each other for use cases. They're even using a chat bot to 24/7 answer student questions about funding and everything else. But then putting that information together, what if I get somebody else's class's information? Or in a Zoom call, here's a question: is that student information being told in the confidence of a classroom? Is it ethical and safe under FERPA law that is being transcribed and maybe even used to ask more questions about the transcripts using AI within the Teams application, for example?
Right. That comes into play because you have different aspects of data coming in that may different individually that may have been vetted. Okay, this is pretty much in control. But when you have multiple areas coming into the system, then it becomes a different use case to say, okay, how do we test this to make sure that it is adherent to the ethical nature of some of these policies and procedures in place? So that brings to the table another layer of integration testing
Right.
from those aspects, and then getting with your tech folks and writing the right use cases to then test against that before you make it available, I think is one approach. That's an interesting use case. That's an interesting situation.
Yeah, and we're spending all summer just to do this. So we started the committee. 64 people are working at every level from every discipline. So, from counselors to everybody. So it's I don't know if anybody has done it perfectly well yet. So we looked at Stanford, MIT, and a couple other ones, but haven't found a use case that we can apply, carte blanche right to our kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm glad that you pointing out that you have all these diverse groups of people, and those are stakeholders and SMEs in those areas.
Yes,
which are super important because they're going to be able to take it from that lens and understand that data.
And we have students and lawyers in the committee as well, because
that's
representative when you're making these questions about what their future is.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put in here, I don't want to self-promote, but I did do an ethics. I've been doing 6 2-hour presentations about, this one's about ethics. I'm also working with Adobe on their content authenticity initiative. And I have been working with them. They actually were able to engineer out the majority of bias when image making. So the prompt that I use, there's an article up in the text there, where they actually, if I asked for a picture of 4 nurses, it actually matched the demographics across the United States of nurses with certifications. I did the same with doctors, and you got the same thing. Whereas, Google's little faux pas with women, Chinese, Nazi soldiers didn't go so well. So,
yeah, that was a bit of a mess.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
Now, Nisha has a question.
Yes.
Oops, sorry. I'm still learning how to hit the emojis on Google Meet here. So, Anthony, thank you so much for just very useful information and to kind of be aware of on these different levels. And I had a question in regards to healthcare. I'm a medical professional in our medical system, day in and day out, and I know that there's still a lot of bias in terms of implicit and unconscious bias in terms of patient care and how we are kind of dealing with that on the floor. And that's just something part of our sort of our training is becoming physicians and nurses. That's not overtly said, but it's kind of it's a part of the undercurrent that happens, unfortunately. So my query is that if you've seen are the places that are happening, both, I think you mentioned insurance in terms of some of the healthcare insurances, maybe possibly kind of biasing it somehow, and I don't know exactly how that would be done in the filtering process, but are there other places that we could be inputting data that be clean? And are there places that we should be looking at that hasn't been done so far in healthcare, especially now that we're bringing in AI quite a bit to help with us as doctors in terms of even diagnostics and to kind of collaborate with, and even in surgical procedures, it's becoming more and more prevalent in terms of its own entity as far as being in our system. Secondly, also, especially with even imaging, they're now becoming much more thorough than we are as physicians to even be able to look at x-rays, things that would be not necessarily picked up by the human eye as easily. But so those are some of those things that are happening on more of a physical level. But I was just curious if you had any thoughts on just kind of the span of that, and then maybe where we can actually be instrumental in kind of, even raising the consciousness about where we could be. Otherwise, I mean, my fear is that we're going to continue being the same way in terms of our biased approach to healthcare because of the data that we put in and the data that we're trained on. But where can we, as individuals, and also maybe senior leadership in medical facilities, see if we can actually steer away from that as we're bringing on the AI forces to support and help us?
Yeah, you're gonna have to steer. You're gonna have to really steer away from that. You're gonna really have to have somebody analyze your data, because the data is wrought with bias and treatment of minorities, and I could point to minority women and
Right.
pregnancies and things of that nature. And so I have this process that identified in a book, in a couple of books I've written, and this takes the healthcare delivery process from the intake all the way to discharge. There's a process in place, right? And so there's ways to interject AI, and everywhere you interject the AI, that you should have an ethical application of AI for those areas within the process. That includes the data. So your data, I've done some cancer research, non-small cell cancer research, using AI, and looking at the trial, the medical trial data, and kind of going through that with that lens on any particular bias or a slant toward a certain group, and why a certain group is being targeted a certain way. And you just have to really cleanse that data. And like you said,
So you're talking about more on the workflow, so on the end user aspect of it. But and which I totally agree. And you're right. It's minority women that are certainly, especially like in areas certainly in pregnancy and such. But I think sort of that's kind of on the end user side to kind of cleanse that, kind of backflow it up to say, okay, you then to catch somebody at the end. But is there a way to maybe even preemptively come in at looking at cleansing the data input and also the bias that might be going in and into entering data?
So that's the education process, right? So to actually look at, so from this point on, you get new data. That's the education process to understand from an ethical perspective, bias perspective. It's training your staff to identify that within the data as you collect it. Now, if you look at historical data, that's when you have to really cleanse that data for bias, and because historically, that's in the data that you're collecting historically, there's a lot of inherent bias in medical data that's been collected historically. So having your subject matter experts in those areas, and it has to be nailed down by the certain aspect of the medical procedure you're doing, whether it's cancer or something else. What medical procedure are you doing? What type of data are you collecting for that? Is it necessary? Why are we slanted a certain way, right? And so are we going to remove the demographic information from the data? Whether it's socioeconomic data from the profile. So it's things like that steer the medical decisions a certain way. So the data now points to, oh, if you're a socioeconomically disadvantaged minority, you're skewed a certain way, and not looking at the patient wholly based on what's the disease factors and symptom factors that they have. They include that demographic piece, and now you lump everybody in one bucket that doesn't really need to be in that bucket. So
similar to kind of like the HR process in terms of the filters that they might have.
Absolutely.
And then does that carry over into the insurance as well? Or is it a different?
Well, the insurance companies have a mind of their own, and they will they will act as a doctor in many occasions, as you know, and steer a patient in the wrong direction based on their policy and their insurance and their insurance ability to pay. Right, so they're going to recommend certain. It happened to me. My doctor recommended certain medical treatment and certain prescriptions, and my insurance arbitrarily changed it. I told him, "You're crazy. I'm not taking that." I called the doctor. The doctor said, "No, change that prescription back." But that's being your own advocate, and so that's when insurance companies have stepped in and just changed act as a doctor, which they shouldn't be, and change the medication. I mean, that happens to everybody. So you have to be more intentional about what prescriptions and things like that, and communicating with your doctor and pharmacist. And when that insurance company puts this finger on it, reaches in and try to change it, you slap that hand and say, look, this is what's been recommended. This is what I'm going to take. And so, and some people are just not economically able to pay for those things themselves and make those changes. And they just have to go with what the insurance company overruled the doctor. Now, what sense does that make? So
I mean, they do it all the time, and they justify it on cost effectiveness.
Absolutely.
But then it sounds like it's almost like what you're saying is to create a sort of an audit punitive model in the beginning process if they start to do something like that.
Absolutely. And you can identify those insurance companies that do that.
Okay, so it's identifying the insurance companies and sort of giving them a badge of honor, a badge of shame, maybe
something
to come through that process.
But you're right. It's money. It's cost.
Yes, I mean I think they're a little blinded maybe to race and demographics. They're more looking at revenue.
Oh yeah, they don't care about that. Yeah, they care. That's all. They care about the dollar. They care about the cost. Right? Exactly. So.
Okay, well, thank you. That's so. It's really helpful for me to think about. And then, would you point me to any one of your books, maybe, to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of the querying process?
Well, I know my book, Knowledge Management Practice. I have a chapter on healthcare, and then in my latest book, Essential Topics in AI, I got some information around healthcare. I got some other colleagues that take a deeper dive into that. And I can you just ping me. I can find information on that.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been awesome. So I think we're kind of using this session to gauge how long we think the sessions are going to have to be. So I think it's definitely going to be longer than an hour. So we'll probably go for, I don't know, this is an hour and a half. So that seems like a pretty good time to me, but I think it'll kind of even itself out as we go along. Next month.
We just had great questions. I mean, insightful. I mean, yeah, it's like I got me fired up. I'm going into stuff. I'm the one that's promoting using more time. So because from Rick to Marcia, I mean Nisha, I mean everybody. It's like I'm like, wow, I like to dive more into that one.
Yeah, you have to make sure you come back next month. July 1st is AI and accessibility, making AI technologies accessible to people with disabilities, with Dr. Keith, who was in here not long ago, and Sherry Byrne-Haber. And we have some more good things coming up. So stay in touch. If you're not a member of the AI Salon, come and join us. It's free. And we have a good community of people over there talking about ethics, and I can't answer all the questions, and I'm sure Joy can't answer all the questions. So if you all rally together, we can all answer the questions. Maybe.
Exactly.
Thank you.
But it's been great. It's been recorded, so we'll get it up on the YouTube, probably on the AI Salon YouTube, but I'll post a link. So.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
See
much.
you next time.
All right. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I think I stopped it now. There you go.